Welcome back to The Devil's Advocate. This is Ben DeGrow from the Independence Institute, continuing our look at education issues. And today, now we're going to shift gears and talk about fair funding for public school students. Who could possibly be against that? Well, I guess we'll find out with Nora Flood, from President, Colorado League of Charter Schools.
Hi, Ben.
And Sherrie Peif, she's the education reporter with CompleteColorado.com.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the meat of this issue and the story and the good news, I know you always have to bring this up when you work in the charter school world. What is a charter school and what isn't a charter school?
Thank you, Ben. How did you know I was going to want to say something about that?
Just an intuition.
Yeah, thank you. So the Charter School Act was actually passed in Colorado 22 years ago, June 3rd. So we've had a charter school law for 22 years. Started with 2 charter schools that fall, and it really was a genesis of wanting options for families and options for students, and recognizing that no longer is education, I don't think it ever was, a one-size-fit-all for all students and families. And so some very brave people in Colorado, Governor Owens, Barbara O'Brien, some of the different legislators, took it upon themselves to think about what school choice could look like. We were the 3rd state with a charter school law, so it was Minnesota, California, Colorado, leading edge. And now 22 years later, we went from 2 schools that fall to 214 schools in this past school year. We'll be at about 225, and we hit the 100,000 student mark with 101,300 students in public schools.
More than 100,000 students.
More than 100,000 students.
So charter schools are pretty well established, and yet people still have these misconceptions about. What are a few of the big misconceptions people have about charter schools that you can clear up?
We actually did a polling project this spring with 550 voters across the state on their knowledge of, perceptions of, and attitudes toward charter schools. And some of the things that came out, still the misperception that we can charge tuition, which we cannot, that we can test in, which we cannot, that we don't serve special education students, which we do. I think those are some of the main ones. And then I think it's just this idea, it's the attitude toward and perception of that we steal money from the public school system when we are public schools.
That's a yes. Charter schools are public schools.
Charter schools are public schools. And actually, interestingly, there is a national organization, I just got back hours ago, from the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools annual conference. We in Colorado and at the League actually push back against that language of calling them public charter schools, because that connotes that there are private charter schools. There are not private charter schools. So you will hear us flip that language, and we talk about charter public schools, just like magnet public schools.
I'm going to have to work on that one, charter public schools.
I know, we're trying to change the paradigm.
Let's switch over here to Sherrie, because you have been dealing with the issue of charter schools. You're covering a couple of the more contentious school boards in Colorado. God bless you.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the couple of school districts you were looking at, and why this issue of funding charter schools, which are public schools, has become so contentious. What are we seeing?
Well, one of the things that the charter schools have had such a hard time with in the past has been maintenance and capital construction funding and stuff, because what they don't have that the traditional public schools have are bond money and mill levy override money. They've never had access to that kind of funding before. So Jefferson County Public Schools and Thompson School District up in Loveland recently have made votes to equalize that funding that they have received from their mill levy overrides in the past years. Those boards have recognized that the charter schools are still their students, despite the fact that the board of directors for the charter schools have autonomous ability to make changes and do different things. The school boards still are the authorizers of these charter schools, and they've recognized that those are still their students. So Jefferson County over the last 2 years has put out almost $8 million to equalize the funding in their 16 charter schools that they have in their district, and Thompson just put out $450,000 to equalize their funding.
So the state, right? The state gives a certain amount of money, but it's these mill levy overrides, these extra local tax dollars. And it's not just Jefferson County and Thompson we're seeing this. Some of these districts are playing well in the sandbox. They're sharing the money, right? And some are not.
We talk about kind of a bell curve of authorizer practice in the state, and it's a tail, but we have some of there are 178 geographic districts and then the one charter school institute that are allowed to authorize charter schools. We have 46 districts that actually do. And we talk about this bell curve of overtly hostile. It's a tail, but we have some districts that are overtly hostile toward charter schools. Some at the apex, we talk about benign neglect. And it's like they're not going to hurt you, but they're not going to help you. And then we have those that are the coalition of the willing.
What are the couple examples of those, the more positive who are
right.
the willing?
Probably the one we hold out as the shining star is Denver Public Schools, because a couple of years ago, Denver Public Schools actually went retroactive with mill levy sharing with their charter schools. They went back, I think, it's 1998, 2003, 2008, 2012, sharing mill levy. It's a huge difference, because you're right that facilities are the Achilles heel for our charter schools and their operating. So it's not state level funding that we argue about. It's really the local funds that are shared, and sometimes some of those districts that don't even pass through the federal dollars, the title dollars and things like that. So DPS is one that we hold out as what would be our ideal. Douglas County, Boulder, Jeffco, and now Thompson with they're getting there.
They're getting there.
They're getting there. We think it is a sea change for that district, though. And I really do believe that we will see some of this change as more and more districts recognize that our charter school parents are taxpayers and they are
yes.
voters.
And so it's a matter, they're looking at, some school boards are looking at it as these are all our students.
That's right.
And some are looking at it, yours and
Us versus them. And yeah.
So how is this playing out maybe in Jeffco or Thompson? What are some of the arguments that these school board members are using about, one school board member is saying something about where the money is coming from a different place.
I'm glad you asked. Up in Thompson, one of the school board members, Lori Vista Ward, made sure that she first told everybody that she could not vote for this simply because the money was not coming from, she wanted everybody to be clear that the money was not coming from the mill levy override funds. It was coming from their reserve funds. Well, we need to make sure that everybody understands there's no such thing as a mill levy fund account. There's a general fund account.
There's not a bunch of little pots.
There's not. There's one big pot of money that all the money goes into, and then they disperse it. So, I mean, every district has a budget, and you tell what you want to spend on your budget, and sometimes you don't have the revenue to cover that budget, so you dip into your reserve pot if you have the money to dip into. And that's what Thompson did. They dipped into their reserve pot to fund the $450,000. But on that very same budget, they funded an $800,000 worth of a preschool. They funded $500,000 in added insurance costs for their teachers. So any one of those could be considered to be coming from the reserve pot. It's how they decided to market it, oh, we're taking money out of our reserves to do this. But people need to understand the calculations were made based on the mill levy override that is in the Thompson School District.
There's a lot of arguments out there, but they're right. There's one pot of money that they're sharing, and charter schools are public schools.
That's right. And we were talking a little earlier that much of mill levy language is written specifically. It's like a restricted mill levy, and they will say that it is for early childhood funding. Well, we don't expect then that a charter high school would receive that money. It's formulaic, but if it's for technology, if it's for maintenance, if it's for after-school programs, then charters are public schools like any other magnet school or any other choice or option school in a district, and should have exactly the same access to that funding.
So a school board's going to voters and they're asking for money for high schools in the district.
Right.
You're just saying, treat our charter high schools the same as our other public high schools.
That's exactly right.
And one other thing, Ben, that she touched on a little bit on the special education funding and stuff that I don't think people also realize that sometimes dips into charter school funds more so than others, is many school districts have what they call a special education insurance model where they charge their charter schools. In Greeley, it's almost $800 per student to pay for this special education model, and then the school district gets to decide where those students go to school at. So it's very easy for the district to say, well, University High School in Greeley has no special education students, but they may not because the district has decided where those students go based on that funding.
It's a good point. The special education piece comes up a lot, and we know special education students
We
tend
could
to
do a whole
cost
session
more.
on this.
And we don't have a lot of time.
I'm an old special education teacher, so
Right.
just let me say this is near and dear to my heart.
Is this true? Is this going on where a lot of charter schools are being overcharged for these students?
Yes. So in Colorado, our charter schools are not their own LEA. It's a local education agency, which is a federal designation. So any federal funding that comes through has to flow through the district to the charter school. So a district can actually look at all of their special education costs and then charge the charter schools on a per student, not a per special education student, but a per student across the district basis. And yet they can also restrict the high needs students may not be allowed to go to a charter school. So our charter schools typically have learning disabled and lower needs cognitively disabled students in the schools. It's as soon as they reach a certain level of need, it doesn't become cost effective for a district to then support the special education students in the charter school. So then it skews the data so that it seems like charter schools serve fewer special education students.
And that's the bait and switch argument.
And if I could, so Denver now has an arrangement with their charter schools that many of the charter schools, especially those in district facilities, actually have center-based high needs programs for high needs autism, for high needs emotional and social behavioral disorders in their charter schools. So you can think out of the box, but it's like we get slammed both ways. You know, we get charged for special education, but then are not allowed to actually enroll those students.
Believe it or not, we're getting close to the end here. I want to talk a little bit about Jeff, because the Denver Post, of all places.
Yes.
Right, the Denver Post praised Jefferson County.
I have it here. Shall we read it on air? No,
if we had time, we would. But we talk about how in most districts, charters are second-class citizens, but here we have a couple districts that are not.
Right.
Quickly, Jefferson County, one of the arguments we heard was concerns about charter schools not being accountable.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a quick answer for
There
that
is no, charter schools are just as accountable as any other traditional school under the public school system. The only difference is they have their own board of governors, they set their own rules, they set everything, but they still have to take the standardized testing that the other students, and the state of Colorado still looks at it, they still take it into consideration, and they still punish them the exact same way. The problem is some of these school board members want the accountability to rein in with them, not with the state.
And charter schools can be closed, right?
Right.
Quickly, Nora.
And if I may, so we are still held to all of the state and federal mandates that public schools are, like the Financial Transparency Act. So when we talk about charter schools not being financially accountable, look online and down to their check registers, they're still accountable.
Accountability. Charter schools are public schools, and fair funding. 2 school districts have joined the ranks. Congratulations to them. Thank you for watching Devil's Advocate. Welcome back next week for the regular host.